I'm John Barker. I generally go as Gundalo. I'm a engineering manager looking after the community team at Ansible. I am also hiring. I will put the link in the chat shortly. Just a couple of housekeeping things. This is all a bit weird. This is the second time we've used this platform. It seemed to go pretty well last time. Keep the discussion going in the main chat window. There'll always be good discussions going on there. To the right of the chat window, there's the Q&A. Put any questions in there that you might have about either the presentation that's going on, Ansible generally, or the future of the meetups, anything sort of related to those. At the end of each presentation, we'll go through those. It's quite nice rather than sort of like forgetting partway through or having to raise your hands, and we can just sort of track those things there. So I would like to hand over to Colin. You able to join now?
Hey, Gundalo. Cheers. Thanks very much.
Thanks, mate.
Try sharing my screen. Can you see that? Can you see that okay?
Good.
Okay. So my name's Colin. I'm a Linux sysadmin who uses Ansible as much as I can in my day job when I'm not in meetings. And here's a few links that where I can be found. Much more importantly, though, I'm the bass player of the band Dev Null and the Kernel Planets, and everyone in the band is a Linux sysadmin who uses Ansible, and we only play songs written before the Unix epoch, 1st of January 1970. And our drummer Steve Mayer is also in this meetup group, and he may even be here tonight somewhere in the venue, the virtual venue. And so when the pubs and venues are open again, you can book us for your open source conferences or your company event. That's a hint to Rob. And go check us out on Twitter and YouTube. So I live in a, sounds like a different world. I work in the secure enterprise environment, and it's not very rock and roll, I know, and your average DevOps engineer would be pulling their hair out because of all the red tape. However, the companies that, it's companies like these that keeps the likes of Red Hat afloat, because they're the ones with the deep pockets who like paying for software. But there's a problem with an automation perspective in banking and critical national infrastructure, like power stations and air traffic control, is you don't want them to connect to the internet. And so many tools these days reach out to the internet, whether it be for licensing or updates or get the latest, gems or Python pip packages. But the PCI environments, for example, have the cardholder data is secured in a network bubble. So there's from those servers inside, there's no access to the internet. It's just a VDI or a similar desktop portal, and there's no cutting or pasting into the server consoles, and there's no direct SFTP. So what we have to do to get code and binaries into this secure bubble is we need to get them scanned for malicious content, and sometimes with these kiosks, which can scan SD cards, DVD, CDs, or USB devices, and then once you've scanned them, you're escorted to the data center where you plug them into some physical hardware, and then they can, be pulled into the environment. So just for errata and patches, to get that into one of these environments, you need to sync all the updates to an interim host and then export them onto media, scan them or sheep dip them, as it's known, before getting them approval to import it. Also, so data security and regulation compliance also enforces separation of duties, and that's what Rob was touching on in his presentation, which the basic principle of separation of duties is that no individual person, role or group should be able to execute all the parts of a transaction, and this blows the concept of multi-skilled cross-functional teams right out of the water. I like to call it the 7 silos of hell. And with critical national infrastructure, you want a lot of testing. And I've worked at places where it's like 8 hops and more just to get a small config change into production. And so if we take an imaginary app stack of VHA, proxy, JBoss, and Postgres, and we just do 4 hops into production with 2 data centers, you are looking at 52 servers that need to be configured the same. Or do they? When I said these companies had deep pockets, they don't usually like to shell out for test environments at the same spec as prod. And I know we can solve problems like this with Terraform and Packer, but because of the silos and the teams who are looking after different infrastructure from different vendors, you can be faced with a problem. They're also using different tooling. So they might be using VMware vRealize, for example, or Red Hat Satellite. And I know physical servers is a stretch, but people are still deploying physical servers. That's, you can also be inheriting existing infrastructure and building application stacks off that. So enterprise automation is really, really hard to do in a secure environment, even before you've written your first line of code. And this is backed up by the fact that in my rail-based world, most demos are done in CentOS, because things like Subscription Manager, Virtu, and Red Hat software collections are much more problematic to set up and may need infrastructure to support them. So why do you need to code to test your code in the first place? Well, most of my problems have been I didn't read the manual properly. For example, I thought that Ansible default IP was the interface that I was, or the IP address I was connecting to over SSH, but actually it's not, and it's the IP address which the default route is attached to, or has a default route, and basically if I wrote some tests with Ansible, then that test would validate my error. Because if I write the test, and this is the thing, why can't you just use Ansible for testing? Well, of course you can, but there is a school of thought that says you should never mark your own homework. And that's why whenever Dennis and I, who's at the meeting tonight, use Puppet at Barclays, we used server spec in order to do the testing afterwards. So what is verification and validation testing? One of the most important tests to run when deploying an IT solution is infrastructure verification and validation. In other words, making sure that it's configured in the way it's supposed to be. Whoops, sorry, phone call. Typically, V&V is one of the final phases of the test cycle, and it's one of the most important. The goal of V&V is to make sure that it detects inconsistencies between system units that are integrated, or inconsistencies between deployment tiers such as dev, test, and prod, QA, prepare. And if you are going to, if you're going to have a situation where you've got the different tiers on different infrastructure, AWS, VMware, whatever, then there's a lot of work there. Obviously, this can be a major project, especially with organizations and system components. Even for small implementation, it can take a lot of work. And you could have images deployed by different teams, and Bob from infrastructure had a few too many shandies the night before, and he deployed last month's image instead, and then you're wondering why your code's not working whenever you're trying to deploy an application. So a lot of these tools use Python packages or Ruby gems, and that's obviously a no-no in the kind of environment we have, because connecting to the internet. But you could possibly mirror your own repos, but whilst that's doable, in the bubble it takes a lot of effort, and you've got to go and convince security that it's all safe. So what I try and do is replicate this kind of environment. So this is my lab set up here, and this is a diagram, and if a network diagram, and sort of I've host my own Red Hat satellite server or Catello, and GitLab and GitLab runners, etc. inside, and then whenever I want to replicate, not having it's as simple as pulling the cable on the internet cable on the switch or the router. So what is GOSS? GOSS is a YAML-based server-spec alternative tool for validating configuration. GOSS is less than 10 megabytes, and it's a single self-contained binary, so you only have to sheep dip it once. And you can also use the GOSS plugin as a verifier and molecule. So that's the end of the slideshow. So what I'm going to try and do is do a bit of a live demo. I'm going to cut and paste it actually because my typing's horrendous, and you'd see all my bad spelling. So I've hosted the GOSS binary on my local satellite server as I would do inside a network bubble. Once you get it scanned, get it past security. And so I just want to check you can all see that. Can you see that okay? The console? Okay, I'm going to do it anyway. Cool. So okay. So we've downloaded the binary, and we're just going to make it executable. And the thing about GOSS is you can write a YAML file. It's the test file is written in YAML, or GOSS has this really neat auto add function where let me see if I can expand the text. How's that? I hope that's better. So yeah, as I say, GOSS checks the process that you give, or the resource that you pass to it, and then it traces everything associated with that. So if I do GOSS auto add SSHD, GOSS has just checked the SSHD process, saying yes, it exists, the group exists. It says SSHD is running. So, for example, if I was in my lab setup, or I'm developing a deployment, and I've got it perfect in my lab. And how many times have you heard, oh, it worked in my laptop, but not in production? So if I've got it working in my laptop, this is how I prove it. I can gather the tests automatically. So it checks the port that SSD is running on, and checks the service that it's enabled, and whether the SSHD user exists and their shell, etc. So now we have a look here. We've got a GOSS file, YAML file, and that's it. There, that's where. So that's automatically created a test file for us. Now, on this server, this is actually a Elasticsearch server, which I just deployed today or yesterday with Galen Guy's role. So if we have a look and see what we would be interested in on an Elastic server, we've got audit beat. Let's see, scroll up. We've got audit beat and file beat and Elasticsearch. So let's see if we can auto add those. Okay, so Elasticsearch, FileBeat, Kibana, and Logstash. So again, we now have, it's checked the packages that we have installed here. It's checked the port, it's the services that are running, the users, and then the group and the processes. So Elasticsearch relies on Java, so let's add Java. And now it's got grabbed the correct ports that Elasticsearch is on, or listens on, and then we can, let's grab a few more just to speed it up. What I'm going to add here is the package, OpenJDK, user, and file, Red Hat release. So that was, I don't know how many seconds, but you've got a test file here with services, users, processes, and ports. And we want to validate. For example, you can edit this file to anything that is non-specific for this system, and you could change it to the system you want to test. So if you do a GOSS validate format documentation, it shows all the tests we're passing. Of course, we created the test on this server, so you would expect it to pass. But if I want to make sure that from my laptop, all the machines right up to production, I can test and make sure that the things that I'm concerned about are in the right. And maybe this machine was built by a different team. So that's the document. It's got many formats. So you can also have JSON format. So lovely. So that's how GOSS works. It's at the command line. So I mean, I've got an Ansible playbook which pushes the GOSS file on the server, reads from a variable from a vars file what things you're concerned about. What applications you want to manage, what users you want on that system, whatever. And so if I have a look here, I have this at the minute on my local, inside my lab. I've got a GitLab, and I've just, it's the Ansible around it is unimportant because you can write it. You can all write Ansible, and you can probably write it much better than I can. So the idea is that it being able to put this GOSS binary, okay, on the server and then do your test and remove it without a stress. There's no need to install it. With a lot of our other tools, you've got to install a framework around it or extra packages. This is one executable binary that's on and off within a test. So if I go back and we look at so all I'm doing is getting the GOSS binary and deploying it to user local bin, and then looping through these, and there's a vars file in the next one. This is just basic. Then we're running GOSS for multiple resources, and then fetching the output, deleting the GOSS file, and nobody knows we were there. So if I go back to, so here, we can, if I remember the password for this will be fun. So now we should have the test file. Oops, sorry. So we've got a test file for that. Now, if we do, we can then, I said about the extra vars. So if I list that, so these are the things I'd be concerned about. Jenkins, Java, might be worried about key stores and Jenkins, SSH, public or key, and you know, groups are there. Firewall, I want to be able to connect and see if 22 or 443 is open on the box, and I want to be able to read some of the Jenkins config file. So let's do that. We're going to create a check with all of those. Okay, now let's validate. Okay. So we're going to validate with the GOSS file we just created. And of course, I've used this before where we've got multiple interactive servers, you know, and we're able to validate an entire deployment using GOSS and you know, servers that haven't been built by you, you don't know their state as well. So let's have a look at the GOSS results. And we can see that is, yes, okay. So that's it. That's the end of the presentation. And yeah, I'll be around afterwards if anybody has any questions. Thank you very much. Cheers, Gundalo, for asking me to do this.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for being here. It looks like we've got a couple of questions for you, Colin. So the first one is, are you able to provide the GOSS files as a qualification document to security for validation of environment or application?
Sorry, could you just repeat? I'll quickly have a read. Are you provide GOSS files as a qualification document to security for an environment? Or yes. So it's more, well, you would take a tool like Black Duck or Artifactory, which has X-ray in it, which scans the binary, because the thing they're most important worried about is whatever you bringing in, is it malicious? So you can have that scanned by one of those tools, which the company may or may not have, or the GOSS is written in Go, and it's the source code is obviously on GitHub. Let me just pull that up. But yes, so then once you, it's more the testing team that once you convince your testing team, and it's really for sysadmins as well, who want to make sure that they're, that want to make sure that their deployments and the servers they're going on to, when they don't have all the DevOps tools, you can do it quite a lot with GOSS. So there's, okay, does that answer the question?
Yeah, and if you want to follow up on any of the stuff, feel free to just ask stuff in the main chat. So next, I don't know where you've gone, Colin. There's more questions for you, my friend. Come back. So next question, Colin, is can GOSS check that a TCP or UDP port is open, not open between two hosts? I'm not sure if we've lost Colin. I will leave those two questions open. We'll hopefully get around to them later on. There he is.
Wrong screen though.
That's right. Hey, Colin. So the question, I'm not sure if you heard, was can GOSS check that a TCP or UDP port is open or not open between two hosts?
Yes, you can. It's in the documentation. It's definitely there. I just can't find it at the moment. Oh, yeah. So you can. So as I had that TCP connection, it was pointed to localhost. You just put the IP address or the host name, and that's it.
Excellent. And then third and final question for you, Colin, is who sells these security scanning kiosks? Did the kiosks print or write a receipt to the report scan?
Well, to be honest, whenever I've used it, it's normally been taken off me, and then somebody with somebody at security would go and scan it in these OpsWatch machines, and then they would take it into the data center or escort me to the data center.
So mere mortals aren't even allowed near these things then?
Yeah.
Cool.
Well,
excellent.
Certainly where I've worked, yes.
Cool. That's really interesting. It's always interesting to see different environments that, pretty alien to me. Thank you once again. If there's any further questions for Colin, feel free to stick them in the chat, and at the end of the next presentation, we'll all get a chance to chat